history in a neighborly fashion 24/7, 365, or 366 in a leap year. And welcome to part 2 of our weekend Q&A, Ask Me Anything, where for the next hour or so I will be taking and answering all of your questions related to history and social studies and the like. I am History Hefner, wearing my, as I'm getting it cleaned up and put on, wearing my quintessential smoking gown, my dressing gown, my smoking jacket, whatever you like to call it. And for the next hour or so, I'll be answering all of your queries related to history or social studies. And if you like the humanities, the sound of my voice, the look of our studio, the velour of my robe, consider liking and subscribing and becoming a friendly neighborhood historian. It's as easy as that. And Harsonet and Gaiahan, who are already here, good to see you boys. Assume their gender, I'm sorry about that. They will be, they can tell you just how much fun they have here in our live streams and all of that great stuff. So, yes, consider liking and subscribing. That's how you become a friendly neighborhood historian. I am not the friendly neighborhood historian, but I am History Hefner with my quintessential dressing gown. And for the next hour, I have to answer all your questions about history and social studies, as we do this every Friday at 8 p.m., Saturday at 6 p.m., and Sunday tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be giving you a live stream lecture. I will be discussing the history of the Exodus and the settlement of the land of Israel by the Hebrew people, their conquest of the land of Canaan, in relation and celebration and reflection on the Jewish holiday of Passover, which starts tonight and lasts for 8 days, coinciding very closely with the beginning with Palm Sunday tomorrow and Easter, as the two of the three major monotheistic religions in the world get ready for their big religious season. So you are male, proud of it. Well, I'm glad to have you here, Hars, male, female, whatever. I had somebody come into the channel a couple weeks ago and say, what do I think of trans people? And I said, I think they should subscribe, and I love having them here as well, asking questions. And somebody wanted to know a little bit of trans history, so I shared with them the story of Elagabalus, the Roman emperor who was non-binary, and proud of it. So there you go. But yes, this is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, and for the next hour, allow me to answer all of your questions and queries related to social studies and the humanities. Geopolitics, past and present, geography, all of that great stuff. So please be sure to put that in the chat, and I will answer it in a timely manner. We had a really great live stream yesterday with a really great showing from people from all over the world, people from New Zealand and Australia. We had folks from Finland and England and India. It was really awesome. Thoughts on the Battle of Fort McHenry. So Fort McHenry occurs during the War of 1812, a war that the United States got kind of absolutely whipped in. They lost badly to the British. But Fort McHenry was one of the consolation prizes of the war. The British were bombarding Fort McHenry in Boston Harbor, or not Boston, Baltimore Harbor. And the fort withstood the attack, and across the way on a ship, a lawyer named Francis Scott Key watched the battle at night, went to bed hearing the bombs bursting in air, hearing the explosions and the cannon fire and the British trying to bring the fort down. And he saw the American flags flying and was amazed in the morning to see it still flying. They had not raised the white surrender flag to the British onslaught. The British Navy was the largest and most impressive navy in the world at the time, and was throughout most of the early modern period. From the 1600s to the 1900s, the British had the greatest navy in history and in the world, and still probably are the most impressive flotilla in human history. So Horace is asking about the Battle of Fort McHenry. Obviously, Francis Scott Key sees the results, is impressed by it, and writes the words to a poem, which later in that century, I think it was a woman, I forget her name, she turned it into a song, a musical number, the Star-Spangled Banner, seeing the flag was still standing there. And that became the national anthem by Herbert Hoover during the beginning of the Great Depression, as he tried to rally a disheartened and failing American society. So, yeah, in no way affiliated. Great to see you. Who was your favorite Roman emperor and why? Oh my goodness. So I've got to go with the top two best Roman emperors for probably my favorites. Augustus, I'm thinking something else. Augustus, who obviously is what the month of November, August is named after, ruled longer than any other Roman emperor, created the Roman Empire, basically, the first real Caesar or emperor, and the first Roman emperor was their greatest. So that's a really impressive feat. So when you're the first emperor and you will go down as the greatest, basically bar none, you have an incredible legacy. And Augustus's shrewdness is really impressive to me as someone who likes to consider himself brainy and more on the the sleuthing side. You look at someone like Augustus, and he manipulated the entire Roman public to thinking that he was a humble man who really didn't want political power, and then used that to gain more and more political power, sapping away the influence of the Roman Senate so that he could become the definitive ruler of the world. In fact, he didn't want to be called Augustus originally. Augustus means revered one. He was given this title, as well as imperator, which became the term for emperor, by the Senate, and just kind of wrote it off like it was nothing. But all this while, he amassed more and more power and influence for himself, and by the time he was dead, he was the most influential and powerful man in the world. The other Roman emperor that I find quite impressive is probably the runner-up, a man who was so good as emperor, they called him Optimus Princeps, or the greatest ruler. And that was Trajan, who ruled at the beginning of the 2nd century and got Rome its largest extent, conquering huge swathes of land that Rome couldn't even hold on to, including huge portions of Armenia and the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Nabatea, areas like that. A really interesting guy. So thank you, and no way affiliated. Great question there. Daniel, hey, how are you? I'm very good. I hope you're good too. William Haas, great to see you. I don't know what that is. Sorry, Rue. Horace is asking, have you ever been to the Smithsonian Museums in DC? If so, what do you think about them? I haven't actually physically been there, and I should, because that's a travesty that I haven't. But I know a little bit about the history. Actually, it was endowed by a Brit. I was talking about this last night during the live stream Q&A. We do this every Friday at 8 Eastern, Saturdays at 6 Eastern. We're a little late starting the day, but that's okay. And then tomorrow is my live stream lecture where you can tune in and learn the history of the Hebrew settlement of the Middle East, of the Levant, and the story of Passover and where that holiday comes from. Nitin, hello, good to see you. Fat Muppet, I am not gay, but I'm glad that you support everyone in their endeavors. Elon sends his heart out to y'all. Well, that's very fantastic. Please do not mimic the way he does that, though. Yeah. Anyways, Dixie is asking, do you like Trump? Well, I mean, I talk about him a lot here on the channel because obviously being a historian and a social scientist, geopolitics comes into the fray, and so I discuss Donald Trump and what he does, and obviously I don't like the way that historians pretend like they've never seen someone like Trump and he's so catastrophic and awful. Even if Trump was a semi-dictator who wanted to control the world, we've seen plenty of people like that in history who are just as bombastic, rude, and manipulative. We just haven't seen someone with so much media and technological access as Donald Trump in history before, because we didn't have social media when Hitler and Mao were running around. Now, I'm not saying that Trump is Hitler or Mao. I think he's a very brutish and in-your-face individual, and you don't have to go to other countries or to dictators even to find leaders who are like that. You have plenty of examples amongst American presidents like Theodore Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt, Lyndon Johnson, and Andrew Jackson, who were all very brutish, in-your-face characters as well. So, can I speak on the Cabala? So the Cabala is the book of Jewish mysticism. It is an extremely influential thinking of Judaism that interprets their relationship with Hashem or God in a light that is more spiritualized and mystical than mainstream forms of Judaism, such as Reform or Orthodox Judaism. But it is not a particular denomination of Judaism. It is a stream of thought that has influenced Jews in different parts of Judaism through its centuries, obviously with a great connection to Hasidic or Orthodox Eastern European Ashkenazi Jewish practice, but can be practiced by any Jews who are interested in that sort of thing, and by anyone else who is interested in it. So there are Christian mystics, there are Sufi Muslims, and there are Jews who follow the Kabbalah. So it is a series of writings and ideas centered around mystical encounters with the divine. So yes, Fat Muppet, I do know a little bit about that. And obviously part of studying history means you have to study culture, which means you have to study religion. So whenever I talk about religious things, just as an aside for everybody, I am not endorsing one religion or another. I am simply saying the way they practice and why they practice and what they believe and why, which is what I'll be doing tomorrow in my live stream lecture about Passover or Pesach, which starts tonight. Who's your favorite U.S. military general and why? I gotta go with U.S. Grant or Robert E. Lee. I love those Civil War generals. I think both of them were just absolutely incredible. I did a video recently talking about them, and the truth of the matter is Robert E. Lee single-handedly kept the Union Army from winning the Civil War. Almost single-handedly did that. And Ulysses S. Grant, it obviously it was the antidote that the Union needed to actually defeat Robert E. Lee. In fact, Lee had once insulted Grant for being slovenly and ugly, and Grant never made him forget that. When Lee was dressed really proper and prim on April 9th, 1865, Grant walked in slovenly, lazy, and with his suit all dirty, and accepted Lee's surrender in one of the most incredible turn of events. Lee had been a CO, a higher ranking officer during the Mexican-American War to Grant, and Grant ended up getting the last laugh over Lee. Yusma, hey, great to see you. Salam. Alexander or Napoleon was greater? Oh, Benjamin, that's a great question. I've talked about both of them. I have long-form videos on both Alexander the Great and Napoleon that you should go check out. I get long-form videos dropping every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so please go check those out, Benjamin, afterwards. But I think Napoleon is the greater commander. I think Alexander had the greater ratio of success and did it all very quickly, and Caesar and Napoleon were both extremely jealous of Alexander's success at such a young age, and so their goal was to get just as successful just as fast. I still think Napoleon is the best general ever. What's my favorite food? Let me see here. That's a good one. I like shrimp. I love my shrimp. I like shellfish. I'm not a big beef steak guy because of the gaps in my teeth, which I'm sure some of you have noticed. Beef gets stuck in there more than anything else. Don't picture that. That's unpleasant. I do floss. But the truth of the matter is, like a lot of guys, I guess, I like a good steak once in a while. I mean, being a historian, I learn about different types of food and culture and stuff like that. So tomorrow I'll be talking a little bit about the kosher diet, because that is obviously a huge part of a celebration of Pesach, where you can't eat leavened bread, so you can only eat flatbreads like matzah crackers, for instance. But the truth of the matter is, my favorite food would have to, and now going away from that completely, would have to be shellfish, stuff like that. I eat fish and fowl more than I do beef and pork. I'm trying to cut pork out of my diet. Right now I'm on a no sweets diet, stuff like that. So trying to get soda out of there too. Yeah. Yep. If someone puts, Oh, Johnny is asking the most important question in human history. If someone puts pants on their heads, are they still pants, or have the pants become a hat? They are hat pants. Stuck is asking, it's not okay that you are late. Please not be late again. Thank you. Well, please subscribe and I will not be late again. Admiral Kirk, how did you know that? That's my personal secret. From one to another, I don't like you breaking our confidentiality and our trust. Who had a worse term in your opinion, Harsinet's asking, Andrew Johnson or Woodrow Wilson? Andrew Johnson. The most racist, reviled president of his generation, comes after Lincoln, has to fill these giant shoes, does nothing impressive, pardons Confederate leaders, angers the Republicans. If Andrew Johnson had not become president, African Americans would have gotten civil rights ensured to them a lot sooner. The Congress had to go around Andrew Johnson to produce such things as the 14th Amendment, the Freedmen's Bureau, and all the other restitutions they had wanted. If Grant had been president or Lincoln had survived, African Americans would have had much more enshrined, their civil rights would have been much more enshrined, and Confederates would have not been able to come back to political power. The rise of the Democratic Party after the Civil War in Congress was a slow but steady process that really culminated in the 1870s, but it started when Jackson gave favorable terms to the southern states to re-enter the Union and pardon Confederate leaders who many in the North had seen as perpetrators of war crimes. Woodrow Wilson, I don't like as a person, and I think he's a highly overrated president, but his presidency is obviously successful in the fact that the United States wins World War I and gets a huge podium on the world stage that Wilson uses to push his agenda of self-determination, exporting democracy to Europe, and the creation of a League of Nations. So Wilson, although I don't particularly care for him, was a much more successful and likable president, but probably just as racist as Andrew Johnson, by the way. So thank you for asking. Great question, Hars. And Hars is a friendly neighborhood historian, and you can be one too if you just like and subscribe. And I've got social medias. Go to my YouTube page, you can find them. I have a Patreon where I do more exclusive content, like my series on the First Ladies, and early releases are available to you there. And a Substack where if you don't like the sound of my voice, you can read some articles I write with historical, social, political, and cultural commentary. Yeah. No, I do not know why you are seeing that shadow. It might be a branch blowing in the wind. Arapan, hi to you as well. Michael, what's up? Not much. The ceiling for the most part. Otter, great to see you. Longtime friendly neighborhood historian. What is the difference between history and current affairs? So Steve, this is a great question, and the truth of the matter is I don't see much of a difference, because I believe that history is an ongoing tapestry of events, and current affairs are like the part of the tapestry that's being made right now that we will look back on as much as we look back on the Battle of Hastings or the death of Jesus. Do you believe the official history not invented by those who have power and tools to invent it, at least ancient and Middle Age? Ancient history and is very hard because historical writings are hard to come by. You don't see history being written in large amounts, historical accounts, until later in the ancient world. The earliest writings tell us about the culture and societies of the people that live on, but us combining historical accounts is more of conjecture. We have to use public records. Writing about historical events that happened way in the past is something that was done in China, and then the Greeks did it. It doesn't become an art and a practice until the time of the ancient Greeks. And that is, well into the ancient world. So far, it's called the classical world. That's 500-600 BC. So the truth of the matter is, yes, history is written by the victors, and the winners get as I turn on my light, the winners get a huge say. There, I'm much brighter now. So anyways, great question. Hars, can you talk about how Protestant Christianity has influenced the United States? So the United States is founded by Protestant Christianity for the most part, as Protestant Christians were the pilgrims that settled in Massachusetts, as well as the settlers in Jamestown, Virginia. Although they weren't ostensibly a religious colony, they obviously followed the precepts and tenets of the Old and New Testaments, applying them as much as they could to their lives. England had gone through a period of religious transformation throughout the 1500s, which by the early 1600s had seen it become a firmly Protestant country. And really, the debate was, how Protestant would it be? Would it be more of a Calvinist, Reformed Protestant theology, like in Switzerland, or would it be a more mediocre, high church, semi-Catholic Protestantism, like Lutheranism, and the way Anglicanism turned out being in England? So these forms of Christianity, the Puritan strain, influenced the development of New England, the way education, work, production. The Protestants of the Reformed traditions were extremely well known for their productivity in Switzerland, and so were the Puritans, first in England and then in the New World in the colonies of Massachusetts. Plymouth and then Massachusetts Bay Colony and all the colonies that offshoot from them. These people became known as Congregationalists. That's the formation of the Congregationalist Church in America. Meanwhile, sovereign states were founded by people with more Episcopalian, Anglican, moderate views who were less intense about their religious beliefs, yet equally devoted to living in building a religious community. So the truth of the matter is, Harsh, you don't have the United States forming as it does without Protestant Christians who are trying to live out those Protestant precepts in their life around them. Connor's asking, cuneiform texts. Those are what are used to write for us to understand ancient sources and stuff like that, many of them from Babylon and Mesopotamia and Sumeria, which is all kind of one area. And am I a Jew? I am not a Jew. Yeah. What's up, Green Hippo? Great to see you. Anamaya, there's no reason to scream. Hey there, Joseph. Protestants are led astray because it always is congregation to have Masonic membership. I did not know that, Nazgul. I'll have to remember that. Great name, by the way. CB, hello. We need mods. Yeah, where are my mods? I don't have Simon. I don't have Rodolfo. I don't have mods with me today. This is why you should make me moderator. I can keep the trolls away. Let me see. I'm going to scroll down. I see no moderators joining us. So you know what? Harsh, you get your wish on this sunny Saturday afternoon. You will finally get your wish. Okay. All right. So let me see. Now going back. Sorry, guys. Going back to the questions. Thomas, good to see you as always. Hike, great to see you from yesterday. I really appreciated your question about the Dutch and me being able to just rant about Dutch history because people don't know enough about it. What can you tell me about Poland? Any impactful history there? Oh, where do I begin? I mean, I'm doing a series right now on Russian history, and something a lot of people don't know is that in the early 1600s, the Polish were the strongest power in Eastern Europe, not Russia. The Poles had Russia's number. The Poles conquered Russia. Vladislav IV was considered himself the Russian ruler from 1610 to 1612. So they're really fast. So the Polish people are extraordinarily fascinating. When the Jews were kicked out of England and France, they went to Poland. The large number of Jews in Poland during the time of the Shoah, or the Holocaust, was because the Poles had been one of the most friendly to the Jewish people, to the Jews of Europe, the Ashkenazi Jews. And that is where a lot of Jews immigrated from when they came to the United States, Poland and the Russian Empire in the 19th century. Poland obviously lost a lot of its predominance in the 1700s when it was eventually divided up by Prussia, Brandenburg Prussia, and then the Russian Empire. And then in 1920, after World War I was fine, or as I consider it, World War II, because I think there's been 3 world wars, was given its own national status again, its own sovereignty as the country of Poland in 1920. This country was immediately threatened by a communist invasion from the Bolsheviks in Russia under Lenin, who wanted to turn Poland into a communist country and spread the revolution throughout much of Europe. This didn't get off the ground, so invasion of Poland was necessary to achieve these means. And Field Marshal Josif Pilsudski, who has one of the greatest mustaches in human history, look him up, an incredible mustache, basically turned them back and defeated them, and eventually made himself basically the dictator of Poland, and I believe was in power until the 30s. And then in 1939, obviously, with the agreement between the Soviets and the Russians, Poland was invaded and divided up at the beginning of World War III in Europe. So there you go. Let me see here. Pick a side. Native Americans received rights last. What do you mean by rights? You mean like rights to own things, civil rights? Because you're not spelling it correctly. Shrapnel. Okay, you enjoy that. My grandfather was a war criminal. What war was he in? Hello, Pedro. Great to see you. Harsinet's asking, in your opinion, was conservatism of the Monroe Doctrine or liberal American globalism a bigger benefit to the United States? So, I think that I think both have had their place at the particular time, and it's kind of worked out well for the Americans, where the isolationism of the 19th century America was necessary for it to figure out its own societal divides that culminated in the Civil War, which started on this day. I do an on this day video, so every day I do an on this day, what happened on today's date. In April of 1861, April 12, 1861, the Civil War begins. That was the necessary. Those societal divides and differences were necessary to figure out. Then America entered a period of rapid industrialization, which made it wealthy. And then in the 20th century, globalism took over as the United States became more and more involved in changing world affairs around them. First with World War II, and then much more so in World War III, and especially during the Cold War. And it seems like the United States is drawing back to that 19th century thing, basically saying we have problems on the inside to take. Andres, great to see you. I miss Hastings. Well, so does Harold Godwinson. He was king before that, so. Hello, Nightboat. Thank you for subbing. I really appreciate that. We look alike? I'm sure you're very handsome, Ben Humphrey. Thank you, Sharon. I really appreciate that. Please like and subscribe. That is our pinned message for right now. Renee, good to see you. Hello. Okay, cool. Make sure both of those channels subscribe, and I will have to look into that. Zyna Guandam. Okay, gotcha. DPS, who will this put me to sleep since I got no weed? Yes, I do have the ability to put people to sleep. My voice is that soothing. So DPS, I'm glad I could be your dispensary today. Why do pilgrims have belts on their hats? The hat buckle? I don't know why. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, it's one of those things where that was the fashion of the time, is where I can always default to. Can you talk about pre-Civil War? Harsinet's asking, can you talk about pre-Civil War hush harbors by slaves? Hush harbors, if I'm correct, were used in the Underground Railroad. So the Underground Railroad wasn't an actual railroad, but a series of networks which allowed African Americans to flee the South, go to the North, and eventually go to Canada, where slavery was illegal, and their masters couldn't chase them across the borders internationally to do that. And hush harbors, if I am correct, are places where they were shipped away. There was also an effort by the Americans to send blacks back to Africa who had been freed. This was the American Conservation Movement led by President Monroe. This led to the creation of Liberia. V, I'm sorry about your anxiety. I hope you get that treated. French Revolution. When did Freemasonry come to North America? Freemasonry has been part of the American story for a long time, and several of the founding fathers were involved in that secret society. French Revolution was inspired by the events in the USA, 18th century, or was it an independent process? Definitely inspired by the events here. Marquis de Lafayette Prop, that's a great question, by the way, was one of the leaders of the American Revolution. He's one of the Frenchmen who came and helped the Americans defeat the English. Then he goes back and helps lead the French in their revolution, and he's one of the less radical. He's more of a Jeffersonian, Washingtonian sort of figure compared to the real radicals, the Jacobins. Maximilien Robespierre is a great example of this. Definitely the French Revolution is influenced and in some ways caused by the American Revolution. France bankrupts itself to help the Americans, and that leads to a lot of problems. You are very welcome, Harsenet. With great power comes great responsibility. Brandenburg-Württemberg is a state in Germany today. Yes, because the Germans back then weren't a united country, so the principalities had their own titles, and those are counties or areas in Germany today. Brandenburg, Prussia, the Prussians were part of that. Saxony, Silesia. So stuff like that. The legacy of John McCain is overshadowed by his failed presidential campaign. I agree with you, Henry Rice. An amazing man in many ways. Obviously, a POW. Had good connections because of his father's status as an admiral in the U.S. Navy, could have gotten freed for a POW of exchange, but refused to leave his men in the Hanoi Hilton when he was a prisoner of war during the Vietnam War, suffered mightily, came back, became a U.S. senator, and obviously ran for president 2 times. The second time he was the presidential nominee and lost to Barack Obama in 2008. Yes, Ruslan, I believe that the 7 Years' War in the 1750s and 60s was the First World War. Then you have the Second World War would be the Great War of 1914 to 1918, and then World War III is the Nazis. So the next war will be World War IV, in my opinion. Suarez, when did black people stop being in the market? I wish you would ask that a little bit more nicely, but slavery ended, the slave trade ended in America decades before actual slavery ended. The Americans stopped going to Africa and getting slaves from Africa. The British and the French, after they ended their own slave practice, tried to keep Africans from selling other Africans to Arabs and the Ottomans throughout the 19th century, even sending warships to stop the slave trade and stop slave ships. The truth of the matter is that slavery still exists, unfortunately, in Africa to this day, and human trafficking is perhaps the biggest example of slavery in our modern times. In a way it ended, in a way it did not end. If you were asking when did there stop being selling of African Americans in American markets, it would be at this time of the Civil War. Can Otto von Bismarck be seen as the financier of the Prussian natural sciences and engineering and industrials? Basically, there's no Prussian dominance over Germany that makes it the German Empire in 1871 without Otto von Bismarck. How do you get to a skill to speak so fast, but at the same time clear, clean, and with dense information? You know, I don't like speaking this fast. I actually like to slow down. But when I know I've got so many people asking so many great questions, and I know people are waiting to get those questions answered, I go more fast. But I really appreciate what you're faster, not more fast. I really appreciate what you're saying. I just try. I have part of it is also I have so much information that I think is necessary to share, and I want to get it all in there for you. So thank you for keeping up. I know it's harder for other people, and I'm working on speaking slower. I really, really am. When I've got a lot of people asking a lot of questions, it can be a lot harder. So. What about UFO around the USA? Our film is asking. There have been, so unidentified flying objects definitively exist. Whether or not they are examples of extraterrestrial life or government manufacturing, we do not know. Picoside was saying, all the rights voting and very Fing and the blacks are always crying for reparations when, if any, should go to Native Americans first and foremost. I think that the Native Americans have a good case for reparations based on the fact that they've lost all of their land, their culture, and their past to white Americans, but there have been mitigations made, offers made, payments made. I just think that the government has not had a good record in the United States of dealing with Native Americans, so it should not be responsible for doling out payments to Native Americans, because the Bureau of Indian Affairs during the 1800s was an absolute disaster where Native Americans continually struggled working with the U.S. government. Who were the vile people compared to before Hitler and the Nazis? That's a good one. A Mongol, a barbarian, Attila the Hun. Although the barbarians were not as a Philistine, if someone was uncivilized and difficult, you could call them a Philistine. Even though the Philistines were an advanced and complex society, the Sea Peoples who settled the western coast of Palestine near the end of the Iron Age, about 1900 BC. Then, of course, you also have got the barbarians, who were groups of different people, many of them Goths, who conquered the Roman Empire. How do you define a world war? So, Steve, this is what I'm going to do on my video on Monday that's coming out about the 7 Years' War. But a world war involves, you have to have, obviously, the world. You've got to have most, if not all, continents involved in some way, shape, or form. Antarctica doesn't count. And so you have to have most, if not all, of the continents involved. You have to have imperial powers fighting one another with their colonies involved in the conflict. So African colonies, Indian colonies are involved in the 7 Years' War, World War I, and World War II, if we want to use traditional naming. You have to have colonists fighting. The American colonists fight in the 7 Years' War, for example. You have to have native peoples fighting. The Native Americans fight with the French in the 7 Years' War. You have, obviously, the Europeans fighting and dying there. You have Asians involved, the Japanese attacking Burma and trying to get to India during World War III. So you've got that. And for some reason, a precursor has been, ironically, the aggression of the Germans. So you've got the Kaiser basically telling the Austro-Hungarians to run ramshot over the Balkans, and he will deal with the Russians in 1914. You've got Hitler basically taking whatever he thinks he wants because he thinks the Allies are weak, and they were. Not Clemenceau, Daladier and what's his name? Chamberlain. Daladier and Chamberlain. But then you've also got Frederick the Great trying to get Silesia away from Maria Theresa of the Austrians. So you have, so for some reason, a precursor is the aggressiveness of the Germans, a bunch of different continents and countries involved, native peoples fighting, the newest technologies being used to kill each other, and massive deaths. And then the last piece would be huge changes to the world structure. World War I brought about the end of the Russian, German, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman Empire. It made the British Empire stronger than it ever had been. It created a bunch of new countries that we're still trying to figure out in Central and Eastern and Southeastern Europe. It created the first supranational organization. World War III created the preconditions for the Cold War, in which you have a setup of Western Europe, the West versus the East. You have the rise of communism in these former countries that were invaded by the Nazis during World War III. You have an entire shifting of the world changing. You have the creation of Israel, which changes geopolitics in the Middle East because of the Holocaust. The feeling by the international community is that Jews need to have their own state where they will not be bothered by the powers that be in the West. Checkmark. So you have these huge shifting changes in geopolitical alterations because of these world wars. Then you have it with the 7 Years' War. All of the British are so in debt, despite winning the war, that they have to tax their colonies, and that causes the American Revolution. The French are absolutely bankrupt. They've lost all of their colonies in India, most of their colonies in the New World, and they've basically ruined their economy. This will lead to the French Revolution. The Russians could have won the war had their Tsarina Elizabeth lived, and Frederick the Great of the Prussians resigned and conceded. But she dies, her nephew takes over. He is so incompetent and gives the Prussians everything they want because he loves Frederick the Great that his wife overthrows him, and that's Catherine the Great, who is Russia's greatest ruler, except for another man named Peter. So you see huge conditions changing. You see Prussia on the rise because of this, which will eventually allow the Prussians to take over and make Germany a country. The French Revolution is set up, the American Revolution is set up. Britain gains a much bigger amount of control in India, which will lead to them fully colonizing it. Canada is taken over by the British for the most part, and that ends the French control in Canada, but not the French cultural influence. And if the French had won the war, they may have continued to control huge amounts of the Americas, but they never were able to. So it sets up huge changes. And so for me, 7 Years' War is obviously World War I. Picot's side, sorry, I went on a lot about that, but that was a great question, Steve. And so check out my video Monday at 8 p.m. dropping about the 7 Years' War, where I will give even more details about it. Pick a side. Do you like the History Channel? I've been watching it all morning and day. I liked what it used to be. I think it's gotten a little bit too much reality TV, although Vikings is really good. What do you think would have happened if Lincoln had finished a second term and Roosevelt only did 2 terms? Desmond, great question, really great question. Thank you so much for that. I was talking about this just a second ago with Andrew Johnson. If Lincoln had lived, then African Americans may have gotten full equal rights, reparations, 40 acres and a mule, they called it, and there would be far more racial harmony in this country than there is today. Lincoln had a strategy for appeasing white Southerners, but also for giving African Americans what he thought they deserved, the right to vote and the right to own land and work on their own. And education might have become a possibility. African Americans would have been given the chance to go to Africa and create a much more richer society in Liberia, which was the American colonization effort. So if Roosevelt only did 2 terms, it would have been interesting. So I'm assuming you're meaning Franklin Roosevelt. He drops out in the 1940 race. The Democrats probably would have continued to win based off of his clout and pushed us into World War III, and it would have been someone like Henry Wallace or someone like that who would have been president during that war. What is your most interesting Revolutionary War battle? Oh, for me, I just love Washington crossing the Delaware and surprising the Hessian German mercenaries at Trenton. Name, thanks, glory. I appreciate that. Where are you from? I'm an American. I don't get into much more detail than that. I like to be mysterious here on the channel because I'm the one bringing the history to you. I go by History Hefner. My moderators don't even know my name. So, do you think slavery should be brought back in? No. Mini Jim, well, I'm sure they love you too. Slavery is to the Civil War as WMD is to the Iraq invasion. No, that's not fair because there were no WMDs in Iraq and there were plenty of slaves in the South. Friendly history, need your opinion. Quantum computing or machine learning? I don't know enough about those things. I'm not a scientist. So when my friends talk about scientists, my eyes glaze over. Maybe it's the way when I talk about history, their eyes glaze over. But I try to learn about things, and I don't speak about stuff I don't know. But if I had to guess just based off of what I know rudimentarily, quantum computing. Thoughts on BC versus BCE. So Henry, you probably have noticed this as other people have, even though I'm a modern historian, and most modern historians will use BCE and CE because they do not want to sound religious in their discussion. I use BC and AD, and here's why. I don't like the fact that the BCE CE divide is still based on the birth and life of Jesus of Nazareth. It's still the same thing. It's just a more politically correct way of saying it when it's still based around the same events. So it's actually better to use BC and AD because I'm a Westerner, because I'm talking about Western history in a lot of cases. I'm a European historian first and foremost. And I'll occasionally switch over to BCE and CE, but not to be inclusive, because it's still not inclusive if it's still revolving around the birth of probably the most important human being in history, Jesus of Nazareth. And I'm not saying that from a religious perspective. I'm saying the impact of Jesus of Nazareth historically on what has happened in the Western world cannot be overlooked. And obviously the largest religion in the world bears his name. So, or at least his title, Christos, Christ, the Messiah. So I don't use BCE and CE, but I don't fault anyone for using it. I prefer BC and AD just because of that arbitrary way BCE and CE are dated. Welcome in, fellow friendly historians, and welcome in, Ryan. Great to see you. Been a little while. Hello, local historian Robin Hood. Great to see you back again. How did a single bullet? What a silly thing that turned into. Yes. How did a single bullet land my brothers in arms into Vietnam? Yes, so the Gulf of Tonkin incident is what you're referring to, 1965, which was probably an exaggeration by the CIA and the Defense Administration, who wanted the Americans to go deeper into Vietnam. Fearing communism spreading to the rest of Southeast Asia, Lyndon Johnson sent in enough soldiers to fight the war, but not enough to win the war, knowing that a large show of American force, particularly invading North Vietnam, would bring in the Soviets and Chinese to help them turn off the international community and make America look like the aggressor. It was a war that either never should have been fought or should have been fought to win immediately. The United States could have won that war whenever they wanted, but the failure to actually ramp up and properly assess their target as the North Vietnamese, and only fighting the Viet Cong and trying to prop up corrupt South Vietnamese governments, fearing the Soviets and the Chinese invading as they had in Korea, led to the United States getting nothing, or at least, so yes, you had the Chinese invade Korea, and that led to the war being a stalemate. But at least the South was an ally to the U.S. The U.S. got nothing out of this when Saigon fell 2 years after the U.S. actually basically declared victory, a very Pyrrhic victory at the Treaty of Paris. By the way, the term Pyrrhic victory comes from King Prius of Epirus, who defeated a Roman army but was so riddled by his casualties that he had to retreat. So a Pyrrhic victory is a victory that really doesn't feel like one. So Robin Hood, that's my quick summation of the war in Vietnam. A war the U.S. could have won, but didn't want to for whatever reason, and I know the reasons. So, what commentary does the anthropological history of man provide on the rise and fall of societies in relationship to IQ? Obviously, the better IQ, the better your society is going to be. Civilizations that prioritize education, development, and different technical skills and put art second to learning basic logic, which is what math is what was supposed to be, tend to do well in IQ tests and tend to do well socioeconomically. It's just been part of human history. Prop, why in your opinion, yeah, Ryan, I had to give it to him. I'm sorry. I know you deserve it too. We will do that very soon. Your clothes though, this is my smoking jacket. That makes me History Hefner. Smoking jackets were invented in the 19th century by Brits coming back from the Crimean War against Russia, where they were given Turkish tobacco and not wanting to get the scent of tobacco all over their clothes, would smoke their pipe wearing a jacket. And it became one of the most well-known and well-regarded fashion statements for nice robes, dressing gowns, things like that. Why is in your opinion, some nations participate and initiate less wars than others, not only these days, but during all human history? Compare, for example, Indians and Chinese who fought less than Europe. I understand where you're going with that. I mean, the Europeans and the Americans fight on a more global scale because their involvement in international conflicts bring them into more fighting than other. It used to be fighting was only for land. Then it was for your own glory. The United States fights wars for other people, which is very, very strange. That's a modern thing. But if you I think what you're pointing out, Prop, is something that I talk about a lot on this channel. It's the technology that puts the Europeans in the crosshairs. It's not necessarily the human nature. Human nature is part of what makes history so fascinating to study. The Indians and the Chinese have fought many wars, not against each other as much, but amongst themselves. I mean, the Manchu dynasty the Ming dynasty was powerful and strong. They had overthrown the Mongols who had conquered them. Then they were conquered by Manchurian invaders, the Manchus, who created the Qing dynasty. Look at India and Pakistan. Look at the Maratha Confederacy. Look at how the Mughal Empire was destroyed by infighting, even as the Europeans were just barely getting there. You look around, and it's access. The more access you have to so the more a human being has access to certain areas, the more he's going to spread his idea or her ideas to those areas, and obviously that's going to lead to conflict and exchange. So yes, the Europeans have fought far more wars, but that is mainly because they've had the technology to go to other places at a faster pace than the Chinese or the Indians, even though the Chinese were actually outpacing them on that until the late 15th century. If you love talking about history and receiving in-depth information on global historical topics in a friendly manner, like and subscribe to Friendly History. That's an excellent way to put it, Harsonet, and I'm going to pin that as our message today. And if you could put the social media handles, find them, and put them in the chat along with the Patreon, I'd really appreciate that. Yes, Yusma, I've heard that about Catherine the Great. I've never seen it confirmed. I mean, they did not have a very loving or harmonious relationship, and she was known for having many, many male lovers. My family moved to the U.S. from Germany during the 40s for no reason in particular. I don't laugh that much because I've heard so many jokes, and I've got one of those sense of humor where I'm always trying to make other people laugh, so it's hard to make me laugh, but that was funny for no reason at all. I love the absurdity. It's like the Monty Python, and now for something completely different. Joe, no, Joe, I would not do that. Not even for you to subscribe. I mean, my wonderful moderator, Rodolfo, who does such a great job moderating, has been asking me to dance and sing for a long time, and I won't even do that because I don't want to make people's ears bleed. But Joe, I appreciate you being here. Like and subscribe. French eat horses, that's why they can't win a war. What's the joke? Why do the French have so many civil wars so they can win one once in a while? Very good one, Milk. They would have won it more today. I think there's been a lot of armies and civilizations that have eaten horses at one point or another, both for meat, but also because they had no choice. Who invented Israel, and why did they get given Jerusalem? So Tyro, Israel, so that's a very loaded question. You're going to learn more about that if you come to the live stream lecture tomorrow. But basically, the modern state of Israel was created by the UN in 1948. 48? Yes, 48. But the Jews have been resettling that land for 70 years plus before then in an effort called Zionism, where they had rebuilt and resettled a lot of the land that had ancestrally been their homeland. Obviously, the Jews had lived in that, have ties to that land that go back at least 3,000 years. Jerusalem was given to them, but eventually divided into different sectors. It is run by the Israeli government because it is seen as the ancient capital of the Jewish people. And obviously, in one of his most controversial decisions, President Trump moved the embassy from Tel Aviv, Israel, to Jerusalem. Junior low-income classes are still focused upon slavery. Okay, thank you for informing us of that. What would happen if Theodore Roosevelt won a third term over Taft? I think he would have gotten us into war. So 1912. So are you talking about 1908 or 1912? Because Theodore Roosevelt drops out of 1908, comes back in 1912 to get revenge on Taft, but only splits the Republican vote so Wilson can become president. If Roosevelt had won in 1912, he would have gotten us into World War I right away, World War II, and us by meaning Americans, because I'm an American, so that's as far as I go in my personal location. But they would have won. They would have probably won World War I a lot sooner. World War II. And that might have kept the Russian Empire from falling, kept the Tsar in power. Who knows what it would have done. He hated the fact that Wilson would not get the United States in the war. He wanted to go fight in the war when it first started, even though he was in his late 50s at that point. If he had won a third term over Taft, there wouldn't have been Woodrow Wilson as president. So, you're not too late, Rodolfo. Great to see you. Thank you for joining us. Very dangerous. I'm glad you're live, but I'm doing this thing right now. But I appreciate you coming and joining us. Subscribe, and I'll subscribe back. Yusma, which one might impact human civilization more, quantum computing or AI? I'd say AI, but I don't know enough about quantum computing to say much more. Political correctness is for numbnuts. I understand where the intention comes from. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it. It's got a negative connotation. I mean, the term was technically invented by Mao, which makes you kind of raise your eyebrows a little bit. But I mean, obviously you don't want to say things that are intentionally offensive all the time. There's nothing offensive with me saying BC or AD. I mean, I've talked to people who are not religious, who I've asked them about that. They don't mind it at all. I hope you guys don't mind it. I don't use it because this is a religious channel. This is a history channel, and the historical terms are BC and AD, so I'm going to keep using them. Are we even sure the current year is correct? Could we be off by a couple hundred years? We could. It doesn't change too much for me, though. Asking as I get to choose first is career and confused. AI would be where you want to go. Assadian disportation. I don't know what that is, so JNR, you've got your shout out. Please subscribe. Yep, you got the wrench. Vietnam War was population control. To some extent it was. 50,000 Americans died, but a lot more Vietnamese died. Why did the Vietnamese declare war on fellow communist Cambodia that was being ruled by Pol Pot? Vishesh, great question. A lot of people don't know this, but in the so soon after the war ends, the killing fields happen in Cambodia where Pol Pot kills nearly a third of the Cambodian population. It is such a grueling and awful example of atrocious genocide and becomes so chaotic and crazy, and the political system is so on the verge of collapse that Vietnam, a fellow communist country, invades to restabilize the country. You know it's going bad when a communist country that just came out of its own war, which is fledgling and struggling, comes in and overthrows you. That's how bad it had gotten. Do you drink? Have you ever tried Cayman cider? I have not tried it, but good recommendation, and I do imbibe from time to time. Not usually on the channel. Somebody has told me that I got a very, very nice groomsman gift for the wedding I went to that has, I can't wait to show you guys, it has an inscription with our channel's name on it, which I really love. But when I get that glass back because I misplaced it, I might have a drink in there or something like that. But for now, I'm just having a Starbucks coffee to keep me energy going. History Hefner is the best. Well, Kevin, you're the best. Thank you so much. Like for the live, subscribe for more. What did you get on APUSH? I didn't take APUSH, believe it or not. I was not an AP guy, but I would have gotten a 6. Come on. If you haven't done a civil rights lecture, maybe you could do that topic next Sunday. I've done a civil rights lecture. I did one right before MLK's birthday, but I could do another one. I'd be happy to. They are not Jews. They are Jewish. Yes, and you are not. I am not American. I am not white. I am Caucasian. There, that's a good one. Arnaud, hello, thank you. I'm reading the chat as quickly as I can. We got a lot here going on. Should Americans that had ancestors that were serfs receive 40 acres and a mule or other reparations? That's a good argument, Steve. The truth of the matter is every human being, for the most part, is descended from somebody who wasn't wealthy, powerful, or strong, and the vast majority of human beings in history were weak and landless and did not hold any political power. And the truth of the matter is that most of the people today descend from people who had no power. I am personally a wildlife biologist, and Theodore Roosevelt is my favorite president. Finishing a speech after getting shot is pretty baller. Yes, I realize there are things people disagree with. Yeah, I love Theodore Roosevelt. Finishes a speech right after getting shot saying, "You deserve a speech," then goes and gets medical attention. Robin Hood, that's an excellent, you're a wildlife biologist. I mean, him with his zoology and his hunting, he's quite a fascinating guy. I love Theodore Roosevelt. He's my third favorite president behind, of course, well, third best president, in my opinion, behind Washington and Lincoln. So go check out my videos on him. I've done several, and a couple on FDR. What's your favorite, Kamessa? Hello, Harry. Great to see you. Better late than never. So let me see. Can speak English. What's your question, Sheepshoe? I don't know what your question is. I think it might have gotten buried there. You bought and read the Communist Manifesto. I still have to read that. I know about what it says, but it's important to read these things. Obviously, a huge, historically significant, socially, culturally, and economically significant document, perhaps the most important of the last 2 centuries. For 400 years, black babies being used. That's fascinating, Jan. Black babies were used as alligator bait. Could this possibly point to a genetic lack of empathy among some groups? Possibly. Where was this happening? I want to know more about that. I'm working my way through. Thank you, Spartacus. I promise, Shipshu, I am going to get to your question, so please put in the chat and I will get to it soon. Tell me why 20th century was so great. I don't know if the 20th century was so great. It's obviously extraordinarily important. You have the development of modern technology in the modern world, but it's also a time of great fear because you have 2 world wars, massive amounts of horrifying genocides, and the Cold War, which was the threat of nuclear annihilation at any point. So it's got this paradox of the human condition where humans do great good and great evil. In the shadow of the fear of the destruction of the mushroom cloud from the Soviet Union and the United States, The Soviets, on April 12th, this day, 1961, send the first man into space, Yuri Gagarin, and 8 years later, the US tops it by sending Neil Armstrong to the moon. What are your views on MLK? When you really look into him, he was a liar on a lot of important things he said. Kind of. He was also a womanizer. MLK wasn't the most moral human being. He was a morally conflicted person. He proves that thing about the human condition. We're capable of great good and great evil. My opinion is that politics of personalities ended 50, 70 years ago in West and in the East. Now all decisions made by a group of authorities and just being read by ministers and presidents. Do you agree? Not fully, but somewhat. I understand where you're coming from. But Chinese and Indians are tolerant of other people. Europeans bomb people because they are brown. They have no soul, no capability of regretting any of them, even though they are many. Yes, the Chinese, very, very tolerant of the Koreans in their history, and the Indians, extremely tolerant of the Pakistanis in their history. Human beings are human beings. The Europeans have done a lot of horrifying nonsense that's absolutely abominable, and I will not defend it. But I know what the Chinese have done in their history. I know about foot binding. I know about the one-child law. I know about those things. I know what the Indians have done. Toleration is something that everybody wants, but very few people get in history. Tell us a controversial fact that people hate. Stalin was worse than Hitler. The Nazis were not as bad. They were horrible, but they were not as bad as the Soviets. And that opinion is so bad that I might get canceled for it. I literally got a video canceled because I said the Nazis would have let the British walk during World War III. So, doppelganger, I've been there before. Why did they ban calling the blackboard and nursery rhyme bar bar black sheep get changed for bar bar rainbow sheep? Any idea? I don't know. I think that's stupid. There is nothing wrong with the term black. I mean, yeah. Popcorn, only sometimes when I'm not compacted. Yes, thank you. Please check those out, Raman. Really great that you're here. Where was Teddy Roosevelt shot? I think it was in Wisconsin. I think he got shot in the chest, but his speech was actually so long that the paper absorbed most of the content, interestingly enough. Yes, Harry, not his fault. He hated Woodrow Wilson. He would have agreed with you. He would have been one of his biggest regrets. Have you done a Korean War presentation? If not, you could do that next Sunday. Yeah, I should do a full-length video on the Korean War itself. The Korean War is the forgotten war, and you got to feel bad for all the men that died and fought in that war on both sides. I love you too, Lil. Let's keep the relationship professional. Vishesh, are there any evidence, folklore of the Romans or Phoenicians or any pre-Viking area culture about? I've heard the Phoenicians went past supposedly the Pillars of Hercules, the Straits of Gibraltar historically, and were the ones who got to America. There are rumors about that. I don't know how much weight they carry. The Romans, there was supposedly a lost fleet that might have gotten here, but I don't think so. You are a fairly balanced historian so far. I wonder if you know your own bias. I try my best to see my biases and be as objective as possible. I have a bias, just like everybody does. Opinions are like navels. Everyone has one, and they often stink. JJ, great to see you. Hello. World War I started in the Balkans, World War II, Poland, World War III. Is it the obvious answers? No, World War III for me started in Poland, World War II in the Balkans, World War I in Prussia, actually it started here with the French-Indian War in 1754. My pleasure, name. Children are coming home from school brainwashed. What else is new? Yusma, don't you think Zionism puts Jewish people in bad light, just like ISIS causes Islamophobia? I don't think there's anything wrong with Zionism. I think there's something inherently wrong with ISIS. Do you think that Austria-Hungary was justified in invading Serbia, not based just on the ultimatum, but on 10 years up to the assassination as well? No. I understand what Franz Josef was trying to do, but he was basically he knew what he was starting. He knew that this wasn't going to be just a simple conflict. He knew that by going into Serbia, he was going to get the Russians involved, and the Germans were going to attack the Russians, and he had to know the French would have attacked the Germans. They thought this would be a quick war like the Franco-Prussian War, but there was already too much weight involved. What the Germans did not expect was for the British to get involved in the war, and when that happened, it was off to the races. Neil Armstrong was supposed to go to Denver. NASA overshot. I don't think that's true. I'm an idiot. Well, that's mean. They're not old enough to understand. That's fair. That's why critical thinking is so important. It's not about what to think, it's about how to think. Right here in America, not only, but those slaves were also used for lever. I don't know if that's fully true. I would like to see some more information on that. Obviously, the worst I've ever heard is George Washington's slave bones were what his teeth were made out of. But for casual activities, slaves being used as bait might have been the case with some, but I don't know. But I haven't read that much up on it. Do you speak Korean? No, I do not. The great Joseph Stalin was worse than Hitler. Yeah, I wouldn't call him the great at all. Slaves were very expensive. You're black? I'm white. Wow, I did not know that. Thank you, Mr. Know-It-All. You would understand why the only one-child policy is or was necessary until you live in China. Huh? I don't necessarily think that it was necessary to smother children. So, just my opinion. I understand the overpopulation argument, but that's not how you do it. Have you seen the Snow White controversy? And by the way, I know very well that the one-child policy did not just include that. That obviously also included birth control, abortion, and reproductive control and things like that. So I'm very well aware of it. I understand where it came from. I am saying that China has a history of very shady things in its own past. And now that's actually hurting them because their population has grown out of control and there's a disproportionate amount of men to women in China. I have not. Are you referring to this recent Snow White? Because I would rather stay away from that and just let Critical Drinker tell me what to think about that. Use AIs in conjunction with quantum computing. Yep. I would agree with Yeshua. They're definitely combined. I don't know who Spangler is, so I'm sorry, Shipshu, if that was the question you were, I'm terribly sorry. I don't know exactly who he is. You might have to jog my memory. Well, I mean, it was sort of Roosevelt's fault. He didn't have to run against Taft as the third candidate, but the Republican vote and basically gave it to Wilson. He didn't like Taft, and Taft didn't like him. If Taft had been a little bit more diplomatic, Taft would have had 2 terms. I think William Howard Taft is one of the saddest stories in presidential history because he was actually a nice guy who meant well. Why does the left use organized terrorism whereas the right uses lone wolf attacks? It's not always the case. I wouldn't necessarily call the SA left wing, but yeah. Have you heard anything about the new discovery of the pyramids, and if so, what do you make of it? I feel there's a lot of wanting. I don't know what it was, Robin, so I can't speak to it. Can Trump stay in office if the U.S. declares war on Iran? No. Presidents go through wartime elections all the time in the United States. It's a common part of our history. Suarez, how long was Robert Wadlow's? Yeah, I don't know. He was 87, but he only lived to be 26. It was really sad actually what happened to him. Harry, but the dual monarchy had to respond, and Serbia knew the entire ultimatum was based off of Articles 5 and 6, and so they rejected Article 5 that basically made the rest of it irrelevant. They knew the Russians were going to back them up, and they saw Bosnia fall. They had not sent Gavrilo Princip to kill Franz Ferdinand, so they weren't responsible for it, and I don't get it. Silver Edge, on a scale of 1 to 10, how beautiful is Cleopatra? She was like an 8 or a 9, I think. I don't judge historical beauties. She's one of the most beautiful and tantalizing women of all time, but it's always, whenever her history is discovered, and I've talked about this in videos I've made about her, Silver, so go check those out, it's always how sexy she was. And yes, she was very voluptuous, very attractive, very enticing to Caesar and Antony and even Octavian a little bit, but she was also very powerful, very strong, very brilliant, and very cunning. And that attracted Caesar to her more than anything. And for me, I think for a lot of men, a woman who is cunning, strong, and wise is more attractive sometimes than beauty, or at least equally as attractive. So definitely very beautiful. She had beauticians around her all the time. She had, all sorts of acrylics done to her. She had tattoos put on her just to enhance her beauty. Yeah. Tyro, don't say that. That's awful. Harry, and Serbia had run a sham of an investigation, had been defending Serbian nationals who've been assassinating public officials for over a decade and broken several treaties for no reason. That's true, but they felt their autonomy was at stake and that Austro-Hungary just wanted to swallow them up, which, shocker, they did. The Austro-Hungarians weren't there for vengeance against Franz Ferdinand. They were there to take over Serbia. They couldn't have fought the Russians. If you look at how the Russians handled the Austro-Hungarians in the Eastern Front, it is incredible. It's the Germans who sent the Russians packing. Please expand on why World War III started in Poland and World War II I started in Prussia. Yeah, Hicksthus. So this is something I talk about a lot. My video on Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern debuting will go more into detail. I did a live stream lecture on this, but basically for me, the French-Indian War, 7 Years' War, involving the continents of Africa, Asia, and India, Europe, and North America is the First World War, the 1750s. Is it not true that Stalin, Hitler, and Mussolini were all shortlisted for the Nobel Peace Prize? I believe I've heard that before, which is ironic. Shows you exactly how slim the pickings were back then. Oos is saying, like your non-hating persona, fair to say that you are doing the as good as you think is correct. Just seek the truth is the best thing. Thanks for the presence. It's like a breath of old school air, fresh. Oos, I really appreciate that. That's so kind of you. Yusma, if Zionism is a just cause, claiming the whole Levant belongs to Jewish people because of ancestral link 3,000 years ago, if that's acceptable, then half of Europe would have to go to Italy. To be fair, there's some truth to that. I'm saying there is a just cause of saying that we had we have historical connections and ties and spiritual and cultural ones, so we should have some of this land. I'm not saying that the ultra-Zionist message of all of that land belongs to us is necessarily fair, because the Jews under Ben Gurion didn't believe this in 1948. Which presidents liked each other? Oh, gosh. The more I study it, the more I realize how uncommon that is for presidents to like each other. That's a great question. Because Johnson hated Kennedy, Nixon hated Johnson, Ford seemed to like Ford and Carter became very close friends. Reagan was not close with George Bush at first, but that changed later on, and the Bushes became buddies with Obama and the Clintons. So, thank you, Oos. I really appreciate that. Great question, Michael, by the way. Was the U.S.-China Relations Act of 2000 a bad idea by Bill Clinton? I think the idea has been, ever since Nixon went to China in 1972, that China is a communist country, but one that the United States can work with and should work with, and we should utilize the power and creativity of China in the post, when they have kind of abandoned the economic plans of socialism in favor of more, at least, international free markets. I think that's led to a lot of the dependence on Chinese goods. There is a certain amount of perniciousness that is seen by the American public, especially now under Donald Trump, about China's economic platform, whereas before complaints about sweatshops, human rights abuses against Uyghur Muslims, and the dictatorship of Xi Jinping was seen as more of a complaint about their cultural status. But now it's seen as a dual weapon of both economic and cultural. That didn't exist in 2000. It was mutual beneficence for both countries, thinking the Chinese were basically going to be as moral as the Americans. Have you heard about the Korean emperors employing biographers? One time a king fell off a horse and then they recorded. He wanted that off the record and got the biographer killed. That sounds about right. The Koryo Korea, which is where Korea got its name from. How is Joseph Stalin worse than Hitler? He killed 3 times as many people. Let's start there. You said Mongolia invaded. I'm going fast. I can go into a lot more detail, Pico side, and I would happily do that, but I'm at an hour and I'm trying to get as many of these questions answered as possible. And we might have to do this tomorrow after the live stream lecture. You said Mongolia invaded Russia. Mongolia conquered China for a while. What about a video about Mongolia? Yeah, Mongolia that would be a good one. I don't know enough about their history beyond the Mongols to speak on that. I know they were the first Asian country to become communist in the 1920s, but I don't know a huge amount more than that. Cleopatra was Macedonian and a 4 or 5 at best. She was part Macedonian. Another part of history I'm really into would be frontiersman, Davy Crockett. Your thoughts? Interesting guy. Obviously gets his reputation from the Alamo. But yeah, Daniel Boone, John C. Fremont, not only a Western trailblazer, but the first Republican presidential candidate. Kit Carson, makes the Southwest American. Fascinating people. Do you know Ataturk? Yeah, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk basically got rid of the Ottoman Empire and created the modern Republic of Turkey as a semi-religious state, no longer a caliphate, and won back a bunch of land that the Europeans had already taken away from the Ottomans at the end of the Second World War in 1918. So Ali, definitely a fascinating guy. What does NA stand for NATO? North Atlantic. Why is Turkey in the NATO in? Asking for Putin. That's a fair question, but it's obviously Turkey being part of it was because Turkey was one of the first countries that the Soviets tried to cause a communist revolution in after World War III in the 1940s. Because of this, Turkey and Greece instantly became part of it because the U.S., their first acts of containment were against those people, against the Soviets trying to take over those countries. Good question. Vashish, now the king is only known for falling off a horse since the Evercourt biographers did not remove the incident from the court. It's funny how they kind of got back at him that way. Do you know about Kellogg's, a serial millionaire? Yes, Arthur Kellogg, who worked with the Kellogg-Briand Treaty, one of the most important diplomats of the 1920s. I wouldn't say that about all Serbians, puns. I believe Muammar Gaddafi was a very brilliant and intelligent man. I mean, to become that much of a dictator, you obviously have to be intelligent, you have to be smart, but yeah, definitely a controversial opinion. Talk about a hot take today. Nobody on planet Earth is able to negotiate with Europeans, Caucasians, and their predilection to earthly destruction. Just ask the Democrats if war criminals Biden comprehends anything. I'll ask him the next time I have dinner with him. Pan-Africanism has limited economic leverage. European, you're not welcome here. Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't just be Africa in that regard. Well, you've got father, son. There you go, there too, Henry. The 2 Bush presidents. So I needed to adjust my original question. Where do you think World War IV will start? Oh, geez. It's either going to be in Ukraine. If it starts in this climate, as I get up to charge my phone because I'm at 1%, it's either going to be here, it's either going to be in Ukraine or in Israel. Or if North Korea invades South Korea and that brings China into a world war, then yes, it could start in North Korea or in Korea, like the Korean War did. So, the two presidents who had the best relationship was Jefferson and Monroe. Jefferson and Madison worked together to make their own university. They had the best relationship. And Jefferson and Adams hated each other, but rebuilt their relationship, rekindled it to become very close friends near the end of their lives. So, let me see here. Just trying to catch up on the chat. Oh, okay. I think I can do this. Let's see how far. I'm doing the speed round now, guys, because we're over an hour in, and I need to get going. But the two presidents who had the... Okay. Harry, in my opinion, there has been 0 world wars. Where is the war in Antarctica? We need to stop extremist penguins. Yeah, well, that's definitely why the tariffs are there, aren't they? Ren fairs and reenactments, based or cringe. They're okay. It's just one of those things where I'm okay with it because it makes people aware of some of the history, but there's a lot of myth busting that I could do in one of those things. It's important to do to keep history alive, but for me, they are based on stereotypes of that history. But I don't mind inaccurate historical fiction or pieces and stuff like that. What I mind is when historians talk historical fiction. It is awful when your friend's grandmother can get a doctor's appointment and their grandchildren are struggling to get a house. Doesn't make sense. Can you wise this up with the immigrant deal in UK? I don't know what you're referring to, Tyro. If you're going to talk about the UK, you might want to ask Harry. Yeah, sure, that's just not true. How is it that Japan started a war with Russia, then did horrible things to the Chinese, only to go to war with Britain and America in World War III? Explain how Japan is involved in that, if it's only the West. Two presidents that liked each other the most, Trump and his mirror. Very, very good point, Bella. Robin, do you know anything about the Wetzel brothers? Absolutely brutal individuals. Aren't those the guys who made... Isn't that Wetzel's Pretzels? I'm sorry, I probably sound really stupid. Grab it. Sleep deprivation can lead to irritability, mood swings, and an increased risk of depression and anxiety. Sleep is scientifically necessary for maintaining optimal brain and body function, supporting cognitive processes like learning, functioning memory, and regulating various bodily functions. Thank you, Grab. I need that. Yep, they were the cereal magnates. It's funny, they were the cereal magnates who also became some of the most important diplomats in human history. Have you seen 2 British citizens have been arrested in Afghanistan? America intervened to save the American, but had left the 2 British people to rot in the Afghani jail. What an absolute disgrace. Why were they arrested in Afghanistan in the first place? And yes, they should be, and we should intervene to save the 2 Brits if we can. If you guys can't do it, we'll just do it for you, like in World War III. No, Kellogg's the cereal heir. He is the reason that 95% of American men... Okay, Barry, I just don't think that's true. Jaker, great to see you. Hello. Chances of Taiwan being taken over by CCP as of today or in the next 15 years? Very unlikely. Especially with the trade wars, especially with Trump. I don't see them taking over there. I don't see China really wanting to be part of a world war with Russia and Iran. I think they see Russia and Iran as dangerous to their own interests, and they don't want to clean up their mess. Darth Nerd, Star Wars, may the Force be with us all. Biden is not in a nursing home, and I have not met him. Yes, that was a joke. Isaac, make sure to subscribe. You've got your shout out. Do you agree that Joseph Goebbels was a media genius? If he hadn't been a Nazi, he would have been an electrical wizard and one of the most successful campaign managers ever. Yes, and a lot of people use Goebbels-like tactics in political campaigns today. Sean, that's supposed to be just between me and you. But I like your Albanian flag in your profile. Yes, I know that's Albania. Anson, World War II in history was the hook. So much knowledge there with technology. Absolutely. I consider it to be World War III, but I absolutely agree with you otherwise. I will check him out. And yes, we are getting to I finally caught up with it. You're very welcome, Caramel. Guys, make sure to like and subscribe. This has been a real treat and real pleasure. The Deaf Wind. Thank you. So, Lewis Wetzel. Thank you, Robin. Harry, I still owe you the Emperor Norton video. I'm going to do that probably early this week. When will the Kurds be free and have their own country? Never, because we use them to fight. Well, that's sad. They have been a political pawn for a long time. When Cadbury got sold to the Americans, why did the royal stamp get taken off? The wrapping also tastes change. I don't know. I wouldn't know enough about that. I don't know about Cadbury necessarily. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Make sure to like and subscribe on your way out. I really enjoyed this Q&A. Ask me anything. We do this every Friday at 6 and Saturdays at Fridays at 8, Saturdays at 6 Eastern Standard Time. And my name is not Henry. It is History Hefner. Thank you. Really appreciate everybody being here. Robin Hood, you're so very welcome. I hope you all take care. Have a great evening. Stay safe out there. If you're going to go out and party, enjoy your Saturday. I will see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we will be taking a look at the celebration of Passover and the first Jewish settlement in the Levant. So please check that out, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I think we'll really, really enjoy that. But I hope everybody has a great evening. Take care. See you later. Make sure to consider that Patreon. Consider all those other things. My social medias. I hope you have a great evening. And remember, love history. Bye-bye now.